I've been using the DJI Air 3 for over 3 months now, with 250 flights, over 450 kilometers of flight distance, and over 26 hours of flight time. So it's fair to say that I've used this drone enough to give you a comprehensive review. Is the DJI Air 3 an awkward middle child, or is it the best drone that DJI's ever made? Well, you're going to find out in this video. And by the way, this isn't sponsored by DJI, but it is sponsored by Artlist. So let's start out with the build of this drone. It comes in at 720 grams, which is quite a lot heavier than the Air 2S was, and it's quite a lot heavier and bigger than the Mini series. However, it is smaller and lighter than the Mavic 3 series. So the larger size does mean that you do need to think about it when you choose to take this drone out for the day or on a trip. Whereas with the Mini series, bringing that drone along is so light and small that even if you don't use it, it's not annoying because you probably didn't even notice that you brought it with. And on that note, whenever I had a bigger shoot or a trip where I knew I'd be wanting to do a lot of drone stuff, I would always bring the Mavic 3 with me. One, because obviously it's got better cameras, but two, it can handle a variety of weather conditions a lot better than the smaller drones. And that's where the Air 3 is amazing, because even though it's smaller and lighter, it can handle just as many weather conditions as the Mavic 3. It's got the same wind resistance rating up to 12 meters per second, and I've flown it through some really bad conditions, especially in Norway, where the drone would literally come back and be wet because it had started raining mid-flight, and it was completely fine. On top of that, the Air 3 has a maximum ascent and descent rate of 10 meters a second, which is really quick. And that's even faster than the Mavic 3 series and way faster than the Mini series. So having that speed to get up to a certain altitude to get a shot, and then also descending down to come and land is really nice. And now whenever I fly other drones, they all feel sluggish compared to the Air 3. The Air 3 has omni-directional obstacle avoidance, which is really nice because it works as advertised, and I've never had it fail on me where it didn't realize there was an object there and it didn't stop. Obviously I'm checking my surroundings before flying, but it's really good to have that backup there. Now what the Air 3 doesn't have is the new vision assist, which the Mavic 3 series has, which basically in the corner of the screen it shows a little image of what the obstacle avoidance camera is seeing, and this is really nice to have ease of mind when flying around and not being able to see where you're flying. So DJI, please bring that to the Air 3 as well. The DJI Air 3 is the first drone to get the 04 transmission system, and to put it simply, it's amazing. It is by far the best transmission system I've ever used on a DJI drone, ever. The distances and heights you can get while maintaining solid signal are crazy. And on top of that, you get better signal penetration when the drone is nearby you as well. For example, if you have a forest or something in between you and the drone. In Norway, I was actually flying and I had the DJI Air 3 behind the expedition yacht with all that metal in between me and the drone, and the signal remained perfect, which from experience in the past was not the case with other DJI drones. The cool thing about this is no one was complaining about the 03 transmission system being bad in any way, but DJI decided to upgrade it anyways, so we'll always take more range and better signal. The battery life on the Air 3 is really good. They advertise it at up to 46 minutes of flight time, but in real world flying, I've only gotten a maximum of I think 35 minutes of flight time. And I've only ever had 1 or 2 times where I was flying and I wasn't done shooting, but I needed to come back because the battery was running low. So overall, I'm really happy with the battery life of the Air 3. The new charging hub is also really cool. It works just as you would think, charging up the battery sequentially, but the special trick it has is if you hold down the power button here, it'll use the battery with the lowest charge to charge up the battery with the highest charge. So as you can see right now, it's discharging this battery to charge up this one. And it would do that as well with the third battery. So it's basically giving you an extra flight, which is really nice, and I really like that little feature from this hub. It shouldn't come as a surprise that the standout of the Air 3 is the camera system. Now while we look at some cinematic footage taken from the Air 3, I'm going to tell you about today's sponsor, Artlist. I've been using Artlist for years to find all the music for my YouTube channel, social media pages, and also all my client projects. If you've ever looked for music for a video before, you'll know that it's a bit of a nightmare. And that's one thing I really like about Artlist, is they make it really easy to find the exact song that you're looking for. They have a whole selection system where you can find songs by mood, video theme, genre, instrument, or a combination of the above. And they even have a video theme for drone shots. The music used for a video can have a massive effect on the feeling and the look of the video. And I'm going to demonstrate that now with a few cinematic shots taken from the Air 3, and I'm going to put 5 different songs from Artlist on top of the video, and you'll see what a difference it makes. If you're one of the first people to sign up using my link below in the description, then you'll get 2 months free off your subscription. So I highly recommend trying them out. Now what makes the Air 3 cameras special is they have the normal 1x wide angle lens that we're all used to, but on top of that we've also got the addition of the 3x telephoto lens. The great thing about this extra camera is it uses the identical sensor as the wide angle camera, which means you're getting the exact same performance and options from the wide angle camera that you are with the telephoto camera. And this is really important because I hate using a product where it's got this special feature, but if you use that feature, you're going to lose out on performance or resolution or frame rates or quality or whatever the case. But using both of these cameras, you can use them in the same edit and post, and they both look equally as good. Now to get the best quality out of your Air 3, I would recommend going into the custom settings and setting the sharpness to -2 and the noise reduction to 0. I've done pretty comprehensive testing with this drone, and I found that these settings are the best to getting the cleanest and most cinematic video from the Air 3. Both cameras can do 4K up to 100 FPS for slow motion video, and in full HD it can go up to 200 FPS. I've only tried out the 4K option, and I've got to say I'm pretty impressed with it. There's no obvious degradation in the video or artifacts that I've seen in the past with DJI drones when they've gone into that super slow motion category. So overall, I think the slow motion is 100% usable, and I'm very happy with it. The only difference between the two cameras other than the focal length is the aperture of the lens. The wired camera has an aperture of f1.7, while the telephoto has an aperture of f2.8. What this means is if you run the cameras at identical settings, so the same ISO and the same shutter speed, that the telephoto lens is always going to be about 1 stop darker than the wide angle. So it really confused me that the ND filters DJI makes with these drones are the same density across both cameras. Because if you do that when you're flying, then if you expose for the telephoto lens, the wide angle is always going to be overexposed by 1 stop, and vice versa. Now thankfully Freewell has fixed this issue by creating split ND filters for the Air 3. And what they've done here is really simple. Basically just the top ND covering the telephoto camera is about a stop brighter than the ND covering the wide angle camera. And this means you can just set up your exposure on the ground with the same settings across both cameras, and when you pop the ND filter on and fly in the sky, you're going to get equal exposure across both cameras. So for me personally, I think this is a must when flying with the Air 3. The hyperlapse feature of the Air 3 is really good, like all DJI drones these days. What I like to do is get the drone going in the direction I want, at the speed I want, and then I click it into cruise control and the drone does the rest itself. Now, unfortunately, you can only go to a minimum interval of 2 seconds. I really wish it would go down to 1 second, so DJI, please add that in the future for us. The results straight out of the drone are pretty good and will definitely work for a social media post, but if you want the best out of your hyperlapses, you're going to want to shoot where it saves the images in RAW, and then you're going to want to process that and stabilize it in post. You might think that the low light performance of the Air 3 isn't as good as the Mavic 3 with its micro four thirds main sensor, or even the Air 2S 1-inch sensor, but you'd be wrong. While the Air 3 sensor is smaller than these other drones, it uses a stacked and backside illuminated sensor, and it does amazingly in night mode. Honestly, I was kind of blown away by how good the low light is on the Air 3 cameras, and they're 100% usable. We're all familiar with the wide angle camera that comes on the Air 3 because it's what we've had on drones forever. But what's really special about the Air 3 camera system is the 3x telephoto. I think that the 3x telephoto lens is the perfect addition to the Air 3. For me, the 7x telephoto that you get on the Mavic 3 Pro version is a bit too tight, and I found myself never using it just because of how tight it was. I think DJI would have done better by adding an ultra wide camera to the Mavic 3 Pro version, where you get a 0.5x, a 1x, and the 3x. So in the future, maybe consider that, DJI, because I think myself and a lot of other people would love that. The 3x tele lens on the Air 3 really opens up a whole new world and dimension to drone photography and video. You can literally shoot the exact same thing twice and it'll look totally different. I've absolutely loved using this telephoto lens, and I use it almost every time I fly the drone. Just because when you switch from the wide to the telephoto, you might have not even realized it would look like that, but it could be a really cool frame. It's this single feature alone that makes me almost always choose the Air 3 over the Mini 3 or the Mini 4 Pro when I'm choosing a drone to go and shoot out for the day. The Air 3 doesn't offer native vertical video like the Mini series does, but DJI have done something clever here to offer vertical video in up to 2.7K, and it's actually something they've also done on the Pocket 3 recently. And what that is instead of cropping the sensor on the top and the bottom, which they do for normal video, they've now allowed the sensor to use the full height to capture that video. So they crop in the sides and then they use the full height of the sensor to get a bit more headway and leeway on the bottom of the image. So you do get a taller image overall than if you were just shooting in normal video mode. And this is a really good workaround for just getting quick social media content. Personally, I wish all camera companies would follow on with what GoPro has done with their latest cameras, and that's by using the 8x7 sensor, which is essentially a square image. So in one video, you can record landscape and vertical video at once. If all camera companies started doing this, that would make me very happy because it would improve my workflow a lot. So both cameras are capable of shooting 12 megapixel and 48 megapixel stills, which initially I thought was a bit of a gimmick and camera trickery, but after shooting both and comparing them side by side, I found that the 48 megapixel stills do have a lot more detail and you definitely can crop into them a lot more. So from now on, I do tend to use the 48 megapixel mode, even though it does take up a lot more space on the SD card. However, at nighttime, I found that the 12 megapixel images do look a bit better, so when it gets to dark, I do switch back over to 12 megapixels. The ActiveTrack 5.0 on the Air 3 is pretty good. It's not quite to the point where I would personally use it over flying the shot manually myself, but for a lot of less experienced pilots, it's going to be a really good option to get some pretty complicated camera moves smoothly without having to learn how to fly the drone manually to get those kind of shots. What I do like to use is a spotlight mode, where you simply draw a box around your subject and then the drone will basically act like a dual operator. And I can fly the drone wherever I want and it'll keep the camera centered or framed on the object that I drew the box around. And this is a really cool feature to have, especially with the omnidirectional obstacle avoidance. The Air 3 uses the DJI RC2 controller, which is very similar to the original, but now it has external antennas to accommodate the O4 transmission system. The screen on the controller is really bright and for the most part works really well even when outdoors in bright sunlight. On top of that, it's pretty annoying that the DJI RC2 doesn't work with any of the O3 DJI drones. And I feel like it could be easy to make them backwards compatible, but unfortunately they're just not. Which means if you're using something like the Mavic 3 and the Air 3, you're gonna have to bring two different controllers along with you, which is pretty annoying and I wish DJI wouldn't do that in the future. The other thing I would really like DJI to change with their controllers in the future is to not use those little screw-on joysticks. For me, they're really annoying and fiddly, and I've on many occasions dropped them or even lost the sticks entirely. So I really wish they would integrate little folding joysticks into their controllers. So you might be wondering who the Air 3 is actually for. And personally, I think the Air 3 is for people who want more out of their drone than they're getting with the Mini series, and don't want to deal with the extra weight and price and size of the Mavic 3 series. It is the perfect Goldilocks drone between the Mini series and the Mavic series, and it is the epitome and perfect example of getting the best of both worlds. So it might be clear to you now that personally I think the Air 3 is the best drone that DJI has ever released, and it's definitely my favorite. It delivers everything I'd want from a drone, and it gives me everything I would expect from a drone in the size and price and form factor. If you want to pick up the Air 3, then a link to the latest pricing is in the description below, and also don't forget, if you want to try out Artlist, that link is there as well, and I would highly recommend giving them a try, and you'll also get 2 months free if you use that link. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.